She slid the papers across the table with a smirk, like she was playing some clever prank. But as my pen scratched the signature line, I realized the joke wasn't on me. It was on her. That moment didn't arrive out of nowhere. It had been brewing quietly, like a storm I could smell long before the clouds ever rolled in. The truth is, I think she rehearsed it. Maybe not word for word, but in tone, in expression, in the way she wore her cruelty like an expensive coat. Lauren didn't stumble into ending our marriage. She choreographed it. And the night she finally showed her performance, I recognized the script had been written weeks earlier. I still remember that smirk. It wasn't the playful one I fell in love with years ago, the one she used to give when I made some stupid reference to a movie she claimed she hated but secretly loved. No, this one was sharp. It was the kind of smirk a poker player gives when they think they've won the hand before the cards are even flipped over. She had been practicing it in the mirror, I'm convinced of that. Because you don't hit your husband with that kind of perfected cruelty by accident. Looking back, the signs were all there. She had grown colder in small, precise ways. At first, it was in the morning routine. Coffee brewing, her perfume missing. It sounds like nothing, I know. But when you've lived with someone for 6 years, you know when a perfume bottle that's usually there is suddenly tucked into her purse, and you know damn well she isn't carrying it around for work. Then came the rehearsed silences. That's the only way I can describe them. A real silence in a marriage can sometimes feel comfortable. Two people just existing in the same space, not needing to fill the air. But her silences turned heavy, strategic. She didn't just forget to ask about my day. She withheld it. Like the silence itself was punishment. She'd lean back in her chair after dinner, scrolling through her phone, giving me the kind of absent-minded nod you'd give a stranger asking what time it was. There was nothing accidental about it. It was training, conditioning. She wanted me numb before she dropped the bomb. The night before the papers appeared, I noticed something so small, but it cut through me. She was standing in front of the bathroom mirror, lips moving, whispering words I couldn't hear. At first, I thought maybe she was rehearsing for a work presentation or some call she had to make. But when she caught me watching her, she jumped, actually startled, like a kid caught with their hand in the cookie jar. She forced a laugh, waved it off, and said she was just practicing a joke she wanted to tell a coworker. But the look in her eyes told me the truth. She wasn't rehearsing a joke. She was rehearsing the lines she was going to deliver to me, the final act of our marriage. And still, I said nothing. That's the part that still gnaws at me. I just nodded, pretended to buy it, brushed my teeth, and went to bed beside her like nothing had shifted. But something had. Something permanent. That night, she slept easy, curled toward the wall, breathing steady. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slow circles above me. My chest felt tight, not from panic exactly, but from the certainty that my marriage was already over, even if the papers weren't in front of me yet. I knew I'd see them soon. I knew she had already signed her part. I knew her new guy was probably waiting for her outside in his car on the night she planned to hand them over, ready to sweep her away the second she set me free. When she finally did it the next evening, sliding that folder across the table with her lips curled in that smug little smile, I realized she had been practicing that exact gesture. The way she tilted her head, the way her eyes searched mine for the flicker of devastation she wanted so badly to see. And the sickest part? It worked. Inside, I shattered. But outside, I gave her nothing. Not yet. The folder sat between us on the kitchen table like a loaded weapon. Plain manila, unassuming, but heavier than any stack of paper should have been. My name typed neatly on the front, hers too. Legalese inside, spelling out the undoing of years. It wasn't just divorce papers. It was the story of our life together, cut into sections, signed, and notarized. Lauren leaned back in her chair, arms folded, like a teacher waiting for a student to finish a test. She wasn't crying. She wasn't nervous. She looked satisfied. I think that was the hardest part for me, realizing she wasn't hurting. She had rehearsed too much, planned too carefully. She was ready. I, on the other hand, felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My eyes scanned the pages, and each clause read like a memory. Division of property. That was the house we bought when we were still in love, the place I painted and she decorated with thrift store finds. Division of vehicles. That was the car I drove her to work in when she still liked me being around. Retirement accounts. That was the promise of growing old together, cut down to numbers on a page. We weren't just dividing assets. We were slicing up history, and I could feel every slice. I don't know what she expected me to do. Maybe beg, maybe argue, maybe fight her like a man still in love. But something inside me had already gone cold. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. If anything, it felt too steady, as if all those sleepless nights leading up to this moment had already signed it in my heart. The sound of the pen scratching across the page echoed in the kitchen. Each signature was like a nail in a coffin. Not hers, not mine, ours. The marriage we built was being buried, and I was the one digging. When I slid the folder back toward her, I expected a flicker of regret in her eyes, something human. Instead, she gave me that same smug tilt of the head, like she had finally completed some grand performance. "Guess that's that," she said lightly, as if we just finished deciding where to go for dinner. I nodded, but inside, I was screaming. 7 years of memories reduced to a folder she carried away under her arm. The vacations, the fights we got through, the birthdays, the late-night drives when we were broke but happy, it was all in there, stamped and sealed. And yet, as much as it broke me, there was also a strange numbness, like I was watching it all from the outside. Signing those papers didn't feel real. It felt like I was just playing my part in a script she had written months ago. That night, after she left with the folder, I walked through the house like a stranger. Every room looked different, even though nothing had changed. The couch where we'd fallen asleep watching movies, the kitchen where she once laughed at my awful cooking, the bedroom where she whispered promises she'd now forgotten. All of it suddenly belonged to nobody. Or maybe it belonged to both of us, in a way that meant it belonged to neither. I poured myself a drink and sat in the dark, staring at the walls. Signing those papers wasn't just losing her. It was losing the version of me that existed only because of her. And for the first time, I realized how much of myself I had handed over without ever asking what I got back. The first morning after she left, the house felt like a museum. Every object looked like an exhibit. Her mug on the counter, a sweater draped over the chair, a pair of shoes by the door. It was as if she had been there only seconds before, yet the silence told me she wouldn't be coming back. I brewed coffee out of habit, pouring 2 mugs like I always did. Her cup sat untouched on the counter, steam curling into the air before fading into nothing. It struck me as the perfect metaphor, warmth disappearing into emptiness. I didn't pack her things, not yet. Some men, I've heard, throw everything into garbage bags and dump them on the lawn the second she leaves. But I wasn't angry, not in that explosive way anyway. My anger was quieter, heavier. It wasn't rage, it was grief disguised as stillness. Her slippers stayed by the bed. Her perfume still stood on the dresser. The throw blanket she always hogged on the couch remained folded in the corner, smelling faintly of her shampoo. I couldn't bring myself to touch any of it, not because I wanted her back, but because moving those things would mean admitting she was gone. At night, the emptiness was worse. The bed was enormous without her. I rolled to one side, then the other, like I was trying to find where I belonged now. The silence pressed in from the walls. Every creak, every hum of the fridge seemed louder. The house wasn't just empty, it was accusing, reminding me of what used to fill it. I tried to distract myself with routine. I still got up at 6:15, still went to the gym, still answered work emails like nothing had changed. But underneath the motions, I was hollow. Even the gym felt different. The clanging weights, the background music, the chatter of people, none of it could drown out the fact that I had nobody to text when I was on my way home. Emptiness has a way of magnifying everything you've lost. Dinner alone became a ritual of staring at an empty chair. Driving to work meant looking at the passenger seat she used to occupy. Even watching TV felt pointless when half the couch sat unused. I kept thinking back to how casually she pushed those papers across the table, like she had been itching to be free from me, as if I had been a burden she was finally rid of. And now I was living in the aftermath of her freedom, a house full of things that used to mean us and now meant nothing. It's strange, though. Within the emptiness, there was a strange kind of clarity. For years, I had been trying to hold on to something that was already slipping away. Every little argument we ignored, every cold night in bed, every unanswered question, it all added up. Signing the papers didn't destroy the marriage, it just confirmed what had already been lost. Still, emptiness isn't easy to live with. It crawls under your skin, settles in your chest. It whispers at night when you're trying to sleep. It shows you flashes of better times, just to remind you what you'll never have again. And yet, I forced myself to stay, to live in the emptiness, instead of fleeing from it. Because deep down, I knew running from it wouldn't fix anything. I had to sit with it, learn from it, let it carve me out until there was room for something new. At least, that's what I told myself. Even as I sat in the dark living room, staring at the outline of her shoes by the door, wondering if the emptiness would ever feel like anything but punishment. Silence has a weight to it. It doesn't just fill a room, it presses against your chest, makes you aware of every breath you take. That's what life became after she left. Silence so heavy, it felt alive. At first, I thought I could fight it. I turned the TV on, even when I wasn't watching. I let podcasts run while I cooked, just so I wouldn't hear the clink of utensils echo against the kitchen walls. But noise isn't the same as presence. You can blast music until your ears ring, but when it stops, the silence returns, stronger than before. The hardest part wasn't just the quiet house. It was the absence of her voice in my daily rhythm. I used to hear her humming in the shower, half singing along to whatever song she had stuck in her head. I used to wake up to her muttering about coffee or searching for her phone under the blankets. Those little sounds stitched my mornings together. Now I woke to nothing, just the hum of the fridge, the creak of the floorboards, and the echo of a life that used to be full. Starting over isn't dramatic like movies make it seem. There's no grand reinvention. It's slow. It's mundane. It's realizing you don't know what to cook for one person. It's seeing 2 toothbrushes in the cup and forcing yourself to throw one away. It's waking up at 6:15, staring at the empty side of the bed, and deciding to get up anyway. Some nights I tried journaling, thinking maybe if I poured the silence into words, it would stop suffocating me. I filled page after page with nonsense, half-thoughts, questions without answers, fragments of memories. But even on paper, silence lingered between the lines. Friends tried to help. They invited me out for beers, dragged me to football games, even set me up on a blind date once. But nothing stuck. Sitting in a bar surrounded by noise only made me feel lonelier because none of it mattered. None of it filled the space she left behind. The silence followed me everywhere, at work, on my commute, even in the gym. I'd catch myself looking at couples on treadmills or laughing together on walks, and it felt like I was staring at a life from another dimension. Once upon a time, that had been me and her. Now, I was just a man with earbuds in, pretending music was enough. But silence, cruel as it is, also teaches you. You start to hear your own thoughts clearly, without the filter of someone else's presence. You realize how much of yourself you gave away without noticing. You notice how often you used we instead of I, until you forgot who you were outside of her shadow. The silence was punishing, yes, but in that punishment, there was clarity. I could finally see how long I had been carrying a marriage that was already gone. I had been the one filling the silence for years, trying to make conversations, plan dates, spark intimacy, while she rehearsed her exit in front of a mirror. Now, the silence belonged to me, and though it cut deep, there was something almost honest about it. Unlike her smirk, her rehearsed words, her staged performance, the silence didn't lie. Still, every night as I sat on the couch with only the hum of the fridge and the tick of the clock for company, I wondered how long it would take before silence stopped feeling like a punishment and started feeling like peace. It didn't take long before I started hearing about him. Small towns, mutual friends, co-workers who still followed her on social media. Word travels faster than you want it to. I wasn't looking for news about Lauren, but it had a way of finding me. A photo tagged at some bar, a like on a vacation picture, someone mentioning they saw her downtown, laughing in a way she hadn't laughed with me in years. At first, I told myself not to care. She had made her choice. She had slid the papers across the table with a smirk, and I had signed them without a fight. It was over. But the truth is, watching her step into a new life so quickly stung in a way I can't fully explain. I imagined her with him, the mysterious new guy. Was he taller than me? Funnier? Did he make her laugh the way she used to when she'd collapse on the couch beside me, clutching her stomach? Did he know about her chipped red mug that she always packed when she traveled? Or how she hated when people used too much garlic in pasta? Did he notice the little scar on her chin from when she fell off her bike as a kid? The one she hated, but I always thought was endearing. He would. Eventually, he would. Because she was giving him all of herself, the best of her, the part of her she had already taken from me months before she filed the paperwork. That realization cut deeper than the divorce itself. By the time she handed me those papers, she was already his. Her new life seemed shiny, curated, like she'd been waiting years to shed the old one. The dinners, the trips, the posts full of smiles, it all looked effortless. Meanwhile, my life felt stuck in neutral, surrounded by silence and half-empty rooms. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel bitterness then. Not because I wanted her back, but because it felt like she'd rehearsed not just the breakup, but the transition. Like she had been preparing for this new life while I was still clinging to the old one. I remember one night, a friend showed me a picture of her on his phone without warning. She was dressed up, leaning into him, her face glowing under the neon lights of some club. My chest tightened, but not out of longing. It was anger. Anger at the performance. Anger at the fact that she was smiling as if the last 7 years of her life had been nothing more than a dress rehearsal for this moment. I never reached out, never asked her about him, never demanded answers. Because deep down, I already had them. The man she smirked for at my kitchen table was the same man she was probably smirking for now. And yet, in the quiet corners of my nights, I couldn't help but think, let her have him. Let her build her new life with the same smirk, the same rehearsed charm, the same practiced lies. Because the man who feels like he's won doesn't realize he's holding a performance that will eventually end. I had seen behind the curtain. He hadn't, at least not yet. I thought she was done with me. Honestly, I thought she had cut me out of her heart so cleanly that I'd never see another crack in her facade. She had her new man, her new life, her curated pictures full of cocktails and sunsets. I was a closed chapter in her story. At least, that's what I believed, until the night I saw her cry. It was months after the divorce. I was sitting in my truck outside the grocery store, waiting for the rain to ease up before heading in. That's when I noticed her car pull into the lot, parking a few rows over. She didn't see me. She was alone. And the second her engine shut off, she broke. Her head hit the steering wheel, shoulders shaking, sobs ripping through her chest. I could hear nothing from where I sat, but I didn't need to. The image was loud enough. I froze. This wasn't the Lauren who had smirked across the table. This wasn't the woman who'd slid divorce papers at me like she was handing over a menu. This was someone cracked wide open, sobbing in the kind of way you don't fake. And the strangest thing? My first instinct wasn't triumph. It wasn't, see, you deserve this. No, what I felt was confusion. Why was she crying now? She had what she wanted, didn't she? A new life, a new man, her freedom. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, debating if I should get out, if I should knock on her window, ask if she was okay. But I didn't. Something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was self-preservation. Maybe it was the quiet knowledge that her tears weren't for me. Eventually, she wiped her face, straightened up, and forced herself into the grocery store like nothing had happened. And I just sat there, staring at the rain sliding down my windshield, feeling a heaviness I couldn't shake. Her tears haunted me for weeks after that, because they made me realize something I hadn't considered. She wasn't as certain as she pretended to be. Maybe the smirk, the rehearsed lines, the new guy, they were all part of the performance. But performances don't hold forever. They crack, they crumble, and sometimes they fall apart in a grocery store parking lot. It didn't make me want her back. That part of me had already burned out. But it did shift something inside me. For so long, I had painted her as cold, calculated, heartless. Yet those tears proved she was still human, flawed, broken, and maybe not as happy as she wanted the world to believe. And in a way, that realization brought me my first taste of something I hadn't felt in months: peace. Peace doesn't arrive with fireworks. It doesn't kick the door open or announce itself. It just slips in, quietly, so quiet you don't even notice it at first. For me, it showed up on a Saturday morning. I was standing in the kitchen, coffee mug in hand, sunlight spilling through the blinds. The house was quiet, but for the first time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It didn't accuse. It just was. That morning, I realized I could breathe without the weight of her shadow pressing on me. I didn't have to listen for footsteps down the hall. I didn't have to wonder what mood she'd be in, whether I'd be greeted with a smile or a cold shoulder. The silence was mine now. And instead of punishment, it felt like permission. Permission to live differently. Permission to reclaim the parts of me I'd tucked away to keep her happy. I started small, cooking meals she hated but I loved, playing the old country records she always rolled her eyes at, leaving the TV off and just sitting in the quiet, not because I was lonely, but because I finally understood the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is when someone should be there but isn't. Solitude is when nobody's there and you realize you're okay with it. That shift was subtle, but it was life-changing. I noticed it at the gym, too.
Before, workouts had felt routines to keep me distracted. Now, I pushed myself harder, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Every drop of sweat felt like I was wringing out the bitterness, the regret, the heaviness. Reclaiming my body as mine, not something dulled by years of neglect and rejection.
Evenings were the clearest proof of peace arriving. I'd sit on the back porch with a drink, watching the sky fade into shades of orange and purple. For years, I had begged for little moments like that with her. Quiet evenings, simple peace. She had always brushed it off, too busy scrolling, too busy planning the next trip, the next purchase, the next distraction. And now, sitting alone, I realized those moments had never required her. It wasn't happiness yet, not fully, but it was peace. The beginning of it, anyway. A steady heartbeat after months of feeling like I was suffocating. And maybe that's what healing really looks like. Not grand revelations, not some sudden burst of joy, but the quiet acceptance that life can still feel good without the person you once thought you couldn't live without. For the first time since she slid those papers across the table, I didn't feel like the joke was on me. I thought I'd never see her in my doorway again. After the divorce, after the smirk, after the new guy, I assumed her shadow would never cross my threshold. But life has a way of testing you right when you start to find balance. It was a Tuesday evening. I had just come back from the gym, still in sweat-soaked clothes, when the knock came. 3 sharp raps, familiar enough to make my stomach drop. When I opened the door, there she was, Lauren. She looked different. Not worse, not better, just different. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, her makeup smudged like she'd been crying. For the first time in years, she didn't look rehearsed. No smirk, no polished lines. Just a woman standing awkwardly on the porch, clutching her arms like the wind was colder than it really was. "Hey," she said softly. 2 letters, 1 word, and every memory slammed into me at once. The late-night drives, the whispered promises, the silence at the kitchen table, the smirk when she handed me the papers, all of it. I didn't invite her in right away. Part of me wanted to shut the door, to protect the fragile peace I had been building. But another part, the human part, let her inside. She sat on the edge of the couch, glancing around like the house was both familiar and foreign. Her eyes lingered on the coffee table, the photos I hadn't yet taken down, the throw blanket she once loved. I stood, arms crossed, waiting. Finally, she spoke. "I messed up." Those 3 words hit harder than I expected. For months, I had imagined her thriving in her new life, happy with her new guy, free of me. And now, here she was, admitting cracks I had only suspected. But here's the truth. Hearing her say it didn't feel like victory. It felt like temptation, a dangerous one. Because in that moment, every instinct screamed to ask questions, to demand details, to let her tears draw me back into her orbit. But I held back. I remembered the smirk, the rehearsed silence, the way she had made me feel like a burden before she ever handed me those papers. So I sat across from her and said nothing. I let her talk about how things weren't what she thought, how her new life wasn't as shiny as it looked, how the man she had chosen wasn't what she imagined. Her voice cracked, her eyes brimmed, but I stayed silent. It wasn't cruelty, it was self-control, because I knew the trap. If I spoke too soon, if I softened too much, I'd be pulled right back into a storm I had only just escaped. So I let her sit there with her words, her tears, her regret. And in that silence, I realized something. She wasn't here because she loved me. She was here because she had lost what she thought would replace me. And I wasn't about to be anyone's backup plan. Divorce doesn't just split two people, it splits a whole circle. Friends, coworkers, even family members who swore they'd stay neutral end up revealing where their loyalties truly lie. At first, I didn't notice it. The texts from mutual friends still trickled in, the invites to birthdays and barbecues still included both of us. But slowly, lines started to appear. She'd show up with him, and people who had once called me brother shifted their chairs a little closer to her side. It wasn't always malicious. Sometimes it was subtle. Friends telling me they'd catch up soon, but never following through. Or couples we used to double date with, choosing her Instagram posts to like while ignoring mine. Other times, it was obvious. I'd hear that she was painting herself as the brave woman who left an emotionally distant husband, spinning the story so that she was the hero for finding the courage to choose herself. It stung, not because I needed everyone on my side, but because it showed how quickly people rewrite history when it suits them. The same friends who had laughed with us around campfires, who had leaned on me for advice, now acted like I was the background character in a drama where she played the lead. Of course, there were friends who stuck with me, real ones. The kind who didn't ask questions, didn't pry, just showed up with a six-pack and sat beside me in silence. Those were the moments I realized how rare loyalty really is. Divorce shines a harsh light, and the shadows it casts reveal who truly cares. Family wasn't immune either. My mother tried to stay civil, but I could hear the edge in her voice when she mentioned Lauren. My sister cut her off entirely, unfollowing her online, refusing to entertain her new life. My dad, though, stayed quiet, as if he recognized the futility of picking sides in a war where the outcome was already written.
I learned quickly not to waste energy on keeping people. If someone wanted to drift toward her, let them. If they wanted to believe her rehearsed narrative, let them. I wasn't going to compete in the court of public opinion. I had already signed away the marriage. I wasn't about to keep fighting for the approval of people who couldn't see the truth. But there was one thing I did notice. Slowly, word began to spread, not from me, but from reality itself. Her polished version of events started to crack. Friends who had once defended her began to see the other side. Maybe they caught her lies. Maybe they noticed the way she paraded her new man too quickly. Maybe they remembered the quiet efforts I had made for years. Whatever it was, the tide began to shift. Not all at once, not dramatically, but enough for me to stop feeling like I was standing alone. And in that shift, I learned another painful truth. Sometimes, the people who cheer the loudest when you fall are the same ones who come crawling back when they realize the story wasn't what they thought. By then, though, I had stopped caring about who picked which side, because for the first time in years, I had finally chosen my own. Regret has a way of sneaking through even the strongest facades. For months, she paraded her new life, her new man, her freedom, like a badge of honor. But behind all that, cracks began to show. I didn't hear it from her directly at first. It came through whispers, sideways conversations from people who still spoke to us both. One friend mentioned she wasn't as happy as she pretended. Another hinted that the new guy wasn't sticking around as much as she'd hoped. At first, I brushed it off. I didn't want to hang on to rumors. But then came the text. It was late, a Tuesday night, and my phone buzzed with her name on the screen. For a moment, my stomach twisted the way it used to when she texted me during the early days of dating, when her messages meant laughter, curiosity, closeness. But now, all it meant was unfinished business. The message was simple. Do you ever think we made a mistake? 7 words. That was it. But those 7 words carried every ounce of regret she had tried to bury. I didn't respond right away. I sat there staring at the screen, feeling a mix of emotions: anger, pity, disbelief, even a strange sense of relief. Because in that moment, I realized something I hadn't admitted to myself before. I didn't regret it. She sent more texts in the weeks that followed. Not every day, not dramatic confessions, just little drips of guilt. I missed the way we used to laugh. I thought it would feel different. You were always there for me. Her regret wasn't about losing me. It was about realizing that what she'd chosen instead wasn't the fantasy she'd built in her head. And that distinction mattered. I didn't gloat. I didn't rub it in. I didn't even respond most of the time. Because by then, I had seen her cry in her car. I had heard the cracks through mutual friends. And now I had her own words on my phone. She was unraveling, not me. And for the first time in years, I wasn't the one carrying regret. That belonged to her. When you've loved someone as deeply as I once loved Lauren, it's almost instinct to imagine going back, to picture what it would be like if things were different, if the mistakes could be erased, if the story could be rewritten. Her late-night texts, her cracks of vulnerability, her whispered regrets, they were all invitations. Invitations to step back into the storm, to let nostalgia pull me under. For a moment, I'll admit, I thought about it. Not because I still loved her, but because part of me wanted to prove that I was strong enough to fix what she had broken. But then I remembered the smirk, the rehearsed silence, the way she had pushed those papers across the table like it was a joke. That memory anchored me. It reminded me that the woman reaching out now wasn't looking for reconciliation. She was looking for a safety net, a backup plan, and I refused to be that for her. So I stayed gone. It wasn't a dramatic gesture, no long speech, no heated confrontation, just quiet refusal. I stopped answering the messages. I stopped asking mutual friends about her. I stopped letting her name echo in my head at night. Instead, I started pouring into myself. I picked up old hobbies I had abandoned: woodworking, fishing, things she used to roll her eyes at. I reconnected with friends who had never wavered. I even started to laugh again, a genuine laugh that didn't feel forced. Choosing to stay gone wasn't just about her. It was about reclaiming my dignity, about proving to myself that I could build a life without being tethered to someone else's whims. For too long, I had let her moods dictate my peace. Now, my peace was mine alone. The last message she ever sent me was short. I wish you'd answer.
I didn't. Not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. Because answering meant opening the door again, and I knew if I let her back in, I'd lose everything I had fought to rebuild. Staying gone was the hardest choice I ever made, but it was also the one that finally set me free. Looking back now, I can see the story for what it really was. Not a tragedy, not a defeat, just a shedding. When she slid those divorce papers across the table with that smirk, I thought I was losing everything. The house, the routines, the person I once thought was my forever. I signed my name and felt like I was signing away my identity. But I see now that what I was losing wasn't freedom. It was a cage. The marriage had been dying long before the papers appeared. I just hadn't wanted to admit it. I mistook her silence for stress, her distance for a distraction, her rehearsed smiles for love. In truth, she had been slipping away for months, maybe years, while I was still clinging to the ghost of what we used to be. The loss, painful as it was, forced me to face myself, to stand in the silence and learn that it didn't have to be punishment. It could be peace. To realize that solitude isn't emptiness, it's space. And in that space, I found the man I had nearly forgotten I was. Yes, she has her regrets. Yes, she tried to circle back. But I don't need her tears, her texts, or her confessions to validate my worth. Because my value was never in her hands to begin with. The irony is almost poetic. She handed me divorce papers like it was a joke, like she was the one winning the game. But the joke wasn't on me. It was on her. Because in letting me go, she freed me. And in staying gone, I claimed a life she will never be part of again. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Sometimes loss is just freedom in disguise. It doesn't feel like it at first. It feels like being gutted, hollowed out, stripped bare. But once the dust settles, once the silence shifts from punishment to peace, you realize that what you lost wasn't your life. It was the weight holding you down. And the best part? You get to walk away lighter. So yes, she rehearsed the breakup. She smirked, she signed, she cried later in her car. But me? I learned to breathe again. I learned to live again. And I learned that the greatest gift I ever received was the one she thought was my downfall. Her papers weren't the end of me. They were the start.